Welcome to Media That Made Us, the podcast about the books, television shows, movies, video games, and more that influence who we are and who we become. I am your host, Scott Paladin, and this week I am joined by Ari Ingalls, an author and podcaster who's here to talk about the Abhorsen Trilogy, among a few other digressions. It's a lovely conversation, so join us, won't you? Myself out of the very ADHD thing of oh, you've told me a cool story about yourself. I need to tell you something. I have the matching story that I want to tell about myself, and I'm like,
right.
That's not a bad thing, really. But I'm trying to learn the other version of it, where I'm just learning about people and not even inadvertently redirecting the conversation to be about myself. So.
Yeah, no, I 100% understand that instinct, and I'll be game however we go.
So if somebody asks the question, who is Ari? What do you hope the answer is?
Oh, what do I hope the answer is? Oh, man. I mean, a writer, an author is, I think, the aspiration there. Yeah. I think that's the thing that I am working towards as a person. I've got technically, I've written a novel. Have I shown it to anyone? Have I queried agents? No, none of that kind of stuff.
The writing's the easy part, right?
Yeah, relatively. So we'll get there. And I do short stories and stuff every now and then. A lot of this is very as it comes. It shows up on a page somewhere, hopefully, and we move forward. But I do that. I increasingly do podcast stuff.
As we all do these days.
I'm in 2 episodes of your show, BSFF, and let's see, I just started my own show that I'm writing, recording, producing all myself. That is a totally there's one episode. It's going to be as I get to it and feel like it project. I'm not holding myself to anything on there, but
that's honestly the way to do it. By the way, I'm always happy to help people out with stuff like that. If you ever come across a technical question or just how do I do this? This is my 4th project now for podcasting. So I love helping people. So I'm just so you know, you can always hit me up. I love doing that. I realized I was looking at my own screen on the VoIP call, Sisyphus? Is that the right? No, that's not the right one. Who's the one who fell in love with his own?
Narcissus.
Yeah, Narcissus in the pool, looking into my own little VoIP window, and I'm like, I got to turn my background down. So, okay, if you're a writer, a storyteller, right? What is it about that makes that part of your identity? What is it that appeals?
The thing that I love doing, I think, is exploring a character. A lot of what I do, and this extends at this point, storytelling broadly, this will extend to I play a lot of tabletop. I do that with friends pretty regularly. I love embodying, understanding, thinking about someone, and I think that partially that's self-reflective, and partially 100%. That's cooperative with other people, and part of the fun is it's intimidating to share this stuff with other people, but at the same time, it's deeply fulfilling when it goes well. I think it's fair to say.
It is. It's impossible. This is a personal view, but I think it's impossible to write a story without it being in some way personal.
Definitely,
you never come away the other end of something like that without it having put some part of yourself onto the page. And so naturally, of course, trying then showing it to somebody once you realize that's here's me at my most vulnerable. Would you then like to give me critiques?
Here's this is a really deep personal exploration of my insecurities. Yeah, please take a look. I think
I think anybody should be, or any storyteller probably probably are very much. Man, sorry, it's 8 p.m. and my brain's already gone because I'm an old man. Relates to that. There we go. There's the word.
Yeah.
So, like, what kind of kid were you?
I was sort of quiet, sort of shy, sort of nerdy, very nerdy.
Yeah.
Definitely more inclined to like the video games than running around outside. I was kind of not entirely a loner. Like, I've always had friends around, but I feel like I was always, I just kept to myself a lot anyway. And, I say I'm a writer. I believe I picked up reading sort of late. I was just like resistant to it as a young kid, and then eventually was like, oh wait, this is great, and would just like fall into whole series and stuff. But
Oh yeah, at that age where you can just devour books, where it's like
yeah. And here's the trip to the library. Let's get 4 more of this series and finish them in a week. Great. Okay, let's go.
If you don't mind asking, go ahead. I was just saying, whereabouts did you grow up?
I grew up in the edge and then suburb of Baltimore, in Maryland.
Okay.
So Mid-Atlantic in my bones. Miss the ocean sometimes, living out in the Midwest now. But
okay.
Yeah, around there originally.
So like, you said suburban kind of area. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, and you said a lonely kid, or not lonely, but a quiet, sort of nerdy, sort of.
Yeah. Quiet, not interested in attention. A lot of undiagnosed ADHD and gender stuff. In retrospect, it makes parts of that make more sense. For sure.
Yeah, for sure. There's always that reflection of looking back at yourself with your adult eyes and going like, oh yeah.
Oh, that's what, okay. Oh, right.
And then there's also the reverse where it's like, you figure you see something about yourself today, and then you realize you're like, oh wait, that makes a lot of sense from the from the trauma or whatever that came out from before. Oh yeah.
Oh, that's because that, right. All right. Despite all of that, I'm here to talk about books about necromancers and zombies and shit today.
Sure.
And that's like one of my favorite things. And despite all that, I was never the like goth or emo kid, which I think came after the self-awareness.
Gotcha.
More than before the self-awareness.
You can be goth on the inside though, right? Like you don't have to have the plumage in order to. It's something that lives in your rotten soul, right? Where the
right. I had the music taste for it, but like if you'd asked, it would have been like no, definitely not.
You don't. It's what's the phrase? It's camouflage, right? Like it's a little bit of trying to blend in the environment to avoid predators.
It's extremely, for many years, very familiar.
Yeah, I get you. So when did you find the Abhorsen Trilogy?
So I have 1 or 2 specific memories that date it back to 6th grade for me. So that would be age 12, I believe. And I believe my dad introduced me to the series. Okay. He is a teacher and more specifically a children's librarian. So, he had, and he's very into like fantasy, sci-fi, genre fiction stuff. So, he knew the books already. And I can't remember if he read them to me or if I just like read them after he gave them to me. That would have been like around the age where it's getting more likely that it was just me reading it. But that would be sort of the general context there, I think.
Gotcha. And just from like, what's like the 10,000 foot view of what that series is? Yeah.
So it's the first 3 books. For a while, it was the 3 books in the Old Kingdom series. Now it's the first 3. He's written, I believe, 3 more and like a short story collection since these. But they are about the two main characters, Sabriel and Lyriel, from the titles. It's three books. Sabriel, Lyriel, and Abhorsen are the three books, I should say. That's the three. Sabriel and Lyriel are the protagonists. They're half-sisters. And broadly speaking, it's about them sort of coming into their own as they learn different kinds of magic. Necromancy is the big one in both cases, and just the adventures that they have as they sort of save the world from various horrible dead things.
So, and if it's a series mostly concerned with necromancy and sort of the dark world, is it sort of grimdark, or are we talking like?
Not as much as you might think. It's so I'm part of my view here is going to be contaminated because I just last month read the prequel book about their father and like the adventure that he goes on. So that's like a lot of the fresher tone in my head. And there's stuff in these books about like, oh yeah, off screen, a horde of undead has like slaughtered a whole village and recruited them into the horde. Yeah. But we don't like linger on that. We don't focus on it. Overall, I think they're very hopeful stories about the good guys winning and like being willing to sacrifice to do that. But it's not, we're not lingering in misery and despair through the whole thing in a way that grimdark sort of implies to me.
Yeah. Grimdark really needs to be something where like, there isn't, you're not going to overcome it, like it's the world is shit and you're just going to have to deal with that kind of thing. And if the heroes can win in the end, then it's never going to be truly grimdark, right? Right. And it it sort of avoids horror also a lot of the time. Like there are horrible things on screen, horrible creatures, but it doesn't, the characters don't linger in their fear. It's not, it really is a fantasy series to me at the end of the day, even though it plays with all these other elements. Yeah. So what drew you into it when you first read?
I think around that age is I think there's a lot of times in your life when coming of age stories can feel applicable, but I think they spoke to me very much in that way when I first encountered them. I like the main characters a lot. Sabriel and Lyriel, both of them are like, they're out of place. They're loners. They don't feel like they fit into their communities and like the sort of expectations that are around them. And then throughout the books, they both grow into themselves in like really meaningful ways. But what that's not is them becoming like normal and popular, right? Which I think would have been a kind of story that's around and probably I would have seen, but wouldn't have spoke to me as much.
You're not looking for a series where somebody was getting the she's all thatted into the popular girl.
No, Sabriel becomes like a master necromancer and does good things. Like the Abhorsen is this like role that's passed down through lineage, and it's basically the good necromancer is the concept there. And so she steps into that role and starts to help the world and like understand herself and feel what she's capable of. And also people are like, oh, I don't want you here. You're weird. You're scary. I don't know you. You might summon zombies or like kill me. I don't know. And it works for me as a narrative about characters gaining self-confidence and self-understanding without it being, like you said, like she's all thatting them.
Finding their path rather than the world's path, right? Like finding finding their individual success, their way they're meant to be, rather than what the world tells them they're supposed to be. Makes total sense.
Yeah. And then I think that the other really like compelling thing is just I had never seen anything like the way that Garth Nix writes about capital D death and
Okay.
the capital D dead. It's this stuff still tickles me. Death is this realm that when you die or when a necromancer like steps out of their body with their soul, it's this in-between realm that is like this big gray empty void with a massive river running through it. And there's precincts and there's gates. And it like tears down, sort of Dante's Inferno style. He's definitely drawing from that. And each zone is kind of like different. There's one where just like a massive wave chases you through the river. There's one where it's like a narrow bridge path that you have to cross, this kind of stuff. But, and when you get to the end, there's one last gate, the 9th gate. If you pass through there, nobody's ever come back from that.
Okay.
That's death, dying proper at that point. And just like, I think between that and then the dead, which are souls that get sent to the river and go, no, I'm not going to let this take me all the way.
Okay.
And so from that, we get like, horrible scuttling flesh abominations. We get weird spider zombie people, which I had no similar context for this stuff when I was 12. That was that was brand new to me at the time to see. I know I'm talking about like, oh, it was horrible body horror with this big smile on my face, but I mean, that was new and interesting to me. So,
yeah, I mean, there's a reason body horror's got its place. There's a reason why H.R. Giger is so influential, and
right.
like there's a that affects people's limbic system in a way that is totally acceptable. I mean, like it's not surprising at all that would be interesting.
Yeah. I just it felt unique and different from like the other fantasy stuff I was reading at the time. And,
it's interesting because you talked about the realm of death in this universe being, it's a transitional period where a soul comes from our world and then moves through a path and then leaves there to go on to do something else. It's fascinating to me how frequently that is the form of the afterlife, where we as a storyteller, as a humans or whatever, envision not because like if you from the perspective of religions, the afterlife is some eternal place usually, but when it comes to storytelling, that somehow doesn't fit into our conception of what how you tell stories about death. You have to the point where they create a second death, right?
Right. Yeah.
This is not. That's incredibly common. I know that you describe it there. It's in. I mean, they talk about it a little bit in Discworld too, a little bit. It's in what was that Pixar movie Coco does the same version of it where characters. It's so fascinating to me that death is such an that we even when we want to talk about death and tell stories about death, we have to put a second death in there just to make the structure of the story still work together. Otherwise, if everything is eternal and unchanging, how do you tell a compelling story? Like, how do you remove how do you raise the stakes?
Yeah,
it's very fascinating.
Having like a permeable barrier that's like, well, you're not alive, but you can still influence the world. Yeah. We can still do things that have consequences for people that are alive, that kind of stuff. It's just, I think you're right. It's like useful narratively to have that kind of space.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. You're most interested in characters. So, or at least as a storyteller. So what is it about these main characters, Sabriel and Lyriel, that like, is there anything about them that drew you in specifically that you can think of, or was it looking back or?
It's funny. I have like such a deep fondness for these books, but like a lot of details have faded, except for the ones that have remained extremely vivid in my memory.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think I definitely have a fondness for both of them. I think there's like a calm confidence. There's a interest in like learning about these different kinds of magic in the world and these places that they haven't seen that like is at least relatable. If not, I want to go on an adventure and see the world is not exactly an uncommon character motivation.
Well, and sometimes it's interesting because sometimes the protagonist is the least interesting of the characters because they're meant to be a POV. They're meant to be kind of broadly relatable, and a lot of the time they're the least informed person about their own world because by necessity of storytelling, in order to tell the audience about it, you have to tell somebody. So it might as well be the point of view character. So you end up with a character who just kind of wanders through a world kind of blindly going, oh, what's that? And then somebody more informed has to tell them about it. So that's not surprising that maybe they're not the most well defined. You know, this is sort of the difference between Luke Skywalker and Han Solo, right? Where like you've got the one that the audience is supposed to pour themselves into, and then you have the other well defined character who is allowed to be their own person.
I think that's a good they both fit at least somewhat into that mold. I would say.
A lot of protagonists do. So what are the things that sort of have stuck with you all of this time that like really crystallized?
So one of the big like central items in the stories is the Abhorsens have a bandolier of magical bells.
Okay.
And that is like lodged deep in me at this point. It's like a set of 7 bells, and each one, when rung, has different magical effects. They can they can bind things magically so they stop moving. They can put things to sleep. They can cast them into death, like force the spirit to return that way, those sorts of things. But they also, I mean, they're bells, so you ring them, and if you're not extremely careful, it hits everyone in the area, including yourself. So, and also they sort of have minds of their own. They want to do the thing that they are enchanted to do.
Oh, that's great.
And so, like, that hazard, it's extremely useful. It's the only effective weapon they have in a lot of cases, and also they're constantly trying to like get free and just ring merrily away and ruin everything.
And so it's also a magic that has consequences because you can't perfectly control it, you can't perfectly direct it, so there's always going to be fallout of using it.
It's like a plot point more than once, I think, that like they ring the sleeper bell and the dead that are coming fall asleep, and so do they. Like, you got to be ready, and sometimes something goes a little wrong anyway. That's great. Like, I will praise to death the authors who make a magic system that's so concrete that it's basically a science. They've just written a fictional science, right? Right, yeah.
Those are great, but like, there is something really special about a magic system where like you can't explain everything at it. You know, even the author doesn't properly know everything. And to a little bit that can be used to massage certain plot points to make sure that they happen the way that that the story needs to happen. That's all great too. But like magic by its nature of being something that is not understood, in, you know, the more you explain it, the less it becomes magic, you know, and the more that some of the, I need a word that's magic that's not magic, but like some of the magic is lost when you use it narratively like that, if it's so well explained. So having something like that, I do love that visual of ringing a bell to cast a spell. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and there's other styles of it. Like it's interesting because it is, in its way, it is a fully explained magic system. There's the charter marks are what they're called, and it's a whole sort of like sigil alphabet, right? And you can cast like simple spells by like drawing 1 or 2 and like setting them off. And the idea is that like the bells are like infinitely complex series of these charter marks all woven together. So in the universe, it almost, you know, the sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic concepts. Except it's sufficiently advanced magic is indistinguishable from magic in this case. Like some ancient person did it so good, we don't really know how these work anymore. And I think that's like a fun way to do that as well. That's the distinction between magic or sci-fi and fantasy, really. It's like, it's why something like Star Wars
in a lot of ways is really a fantasy story, rather than it being a sci-fi story. It's not interested in any of the like rules of its world. It's interested in the stories and the characters, and the magic system that exists in it, the Force, is just like whatever is narratively necessary at the time.
To do what I need it to, and it connects us all, and sure.
Yeah. You know, it waits till the third act, and then it lets the hero do the thing they need to do, which is totally fine. Like that has a place in stories. I think I mean, the number of stories that we've told throughout history that are about things like that, where magic and are you know, Beowulf pulling a magic sword out of, you know, Grendel's mother's, you know, what's the word? Her hoard. That's the word I was thinking of.
Right.
I'm having one of those days. Excuse me.
That's okay.
Yeah, and like that is, I don't know. There's something really innate about that. About the, you know, needing a power beyond our own to make stories work. Sometimes is really, you know, kind of human. It's really human.
Yeah. And I think the whole sort of world is steeped in it. I guess. Yeah. I could mention there's technically two different like nations in the stories, the Old Kingdom, which is where all the magic is, and then this other country to the south that just doesn't have magic anymore and is basically I want to say it's basically like 40s or it's a weird mix of like 60s England and like Victorian England. It's a little bit of both in a weird way. But
Garth Nix is obviously just picking and choosing aesthetic features in order to create a
definitely.
Much respect, totally believe it.
It works. It
works.
No,
it's great.
But you know, the Old Kingdom is like old, and they've got there's stuff all over it that is, we don't know how it works anymore. There's a huge magical wall between the two kingdoms that people are like, I guess we built that at some point. If it breaks, we're in trouble because I don't know. And so that like there are things in this world that are beyond human understanding, even when some of these people, some of these characters are like the master magic users in the world, and they're still like, I don't know. I don't think I can do this one.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It paints an interesting picture for me, at least.
And so this was about 6th grade, you said, that you read these? So that's so like middle school. And then you said there's additional books later. Yeah, the first trilogy, and then there's later ones. Was that just like a series that you grew up with as it got more, or was that something you revisited later? Or
so these first 3 are the ones that I like feel like I grew up with, and then I think it was probably in high school or early college when he started writing more books in this line. There's 2 that I haven't read yet, and there's one that I, you know, like I mentioned, just read the other month for the first time. So yeah, I sort of lost track of Garth Nix as an author for a decade-ish somewhere in there, but I've been picking it back up recently again. So.
It's so perilous when an author picks up a series that's older, you know, that they thought and that you thought they were done with, and it's like it's always a roll of the dice. Sometimes they make it better, and that's great. You know, I'll take more of this, and sometimes it's like, oh man, I wish you'd left that alone.
Yeah, I this one that I just read is like the direct prequel to Sabriel, and I had a good time with it. The other 2 are in like ancient history prequel about some of that stuff that's like, we don't know how this works anymore, and like, oh, here's a time back when we did know. And the other one is a direct sequel to Abhorsen, which is probably the one that I'm most like, I hope that's good.
The story that's set the day after, starting from the moment after the big climactic mythical showdown, presumably. That's always a bit fraught. As a place to do it.
Sort of avoided that within this trilogy, because like Sabriel ends, and then Lyriel is about another character like a few years in the future on the other side of the world at first. And there's some interweaving that happens, but we don't have a like, okay, the story's over. Just kidding. So I don't know. I'll probably still read them. I'll see how it goes.
I'm curious. Do you know the author David Eddings at all? Technically, I think by the end it was writing with his wife, so it would be David and Lee Eddings.
Eddings is like vaguely familiar, but I don't think I know it.
He wrote a series. The one that I know him for was called The Belgariad.
Okay.
And then it's one of those things like it's one of the few book series that I can think of as metastatizing, where he wrote a book. I'm sure he just sold it as one book to his publisher. And then that turned into not a trilogy, but a 5-book arc.
Okay.
And then, ending with like, I mean, this isn't spoilers. It ends with like them doing the thing they were saying they were going to do for 5 books. Right.
Right.
And then he picks up like another book immediately afterwards and writes another 5-book arc where the stakes are higher somehow. Right. I don't know.
Yeah.
And other stuff's going on. And then he's like, you know what? I'm not done. It's time for me to write the prequels that cover all of the history of the entire universe up until the moment that the first book started. And this is not, I am being a bit mean. They are good books. I would recommend them to people.
Sure.
But like, man, that is a series where the author, like I said, it like metastasizes. Like this story just kept getting bigger and bigger, man.
that got out of hand. I feel like I get having an idea and being like, but I have all these other ideas too. But I feel like a little more room.
Yeah. I'm probably the only person in the world who read those in chronological order instead of release order. I started with the 2 giant prequels and then read the other books, which I would not recommend. It's not good.
Usually it's you write the prequel after.
Which is what he did. I just read it. Yeah. I just started. I was like, well, I guess I'll start with this big ass book.
Read it. I get it. Reading it in timeline order makes sense.
It's just, I think it's because the person who handed it to me, my wife, was like, here, read this, and just handed me the first one, or hand me the whole series, and I was like, well, which is the first one? I just started it. It's not a good way to do it necessarily, but like, it's interesting how something like that, like even if, I mean, like those are fine books. I can barely remember what happened in most of it, but there's always little bits and pieces of those worlds that will still come up. Like I will still think about, for example, the magic system of that world, like the ability to shape change is basically just a trick people can figure out. Like if you watch enough people shape change, you can go, oh, that's how it's done, and then just do it.
That's great. Yeah.
Which is fascinating. And I like, it's one of the things I will not think about that series for a long time. And then that will come up and I'll go, oh yeah, what an interesting world building idea.
Yeah.
Where it's like something that just, and whether or not the rest of the series is important, these little ideas will just like percolate in the back of your brain for your entire life, things that you'll still be thinking about decades later.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's definitely like things in a series that have done that for me. Like, The Bells is definitely one. I think, you asked about the protagonist and I was like, they're fine. They're protagonists. Yeah. Probably the 2 characters that do stick in my head the most are the sidekick animals. From
Fantastic.
This particular set. There's sort of 2. There's Mogget in the first book, who's this little fluffy white cat, who follows Sabriel around, basically being a snarky asshole and trying to get her to take his collar off because at the end of the day, he is this like, there's the charter magic, like I explained with the sigils and stuff. There's also free magic, which is like more traditional sorcery kind of stuff, just like pulling on the forces of the world. And he's a free magic being, of just sort of massive swarm of tooth and claws kind of persuasion, and the little bell on his collar is the only thing that keeps him as a fluffy little kitty
I love
through
that.
the whole book.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
So he's like, and he hates the Abhorsens is like also I think part of the appeal is he's actively antagonistic to the people he's sidekicking to.
I love when you were describing everything up until the moment when you started talking about what he actually was. I'm sitting there and thinking, there's only 2 ways this goes. There's only 2 ways this goes. You take the collar off and it's either a horrible monster or the book gets really fucking horny.
Those are the two options.
Those are the only two options. I wonder which one it's going to be.
No,
okay.
In this case, it's that one, but
yeah.
For sure could have gone either way.
If you're a brave author, it's both. But
fair, yeah. May we all strive to be that powerful in the stories we tell. But yeah, so it's fun because he hates the Abhorsens because they're the ones that bound him. So he spends the whole book being like, you should just take the collar off. You should just set me free. Do the right thing. I will kill you when you do this. And she has to be like, I'm not going to do that because you're going to kill me when I do that. And also you're really useful sometimes. So he's a great time. And then Lyriel gets the disreputable dog, which I think...
Is that the official title or is that just...
Yeah, that's her name, is the disreputable dog, which I think...
fucking love that. That is such a good name. Oh my God.
One of my all-time favorite character names, I think, anywhere.
Yeah, that's great.
She finds there's... she's part of this order of seers, except she doesn't actually have the sight, so that's like her sort of outcast thing. And she works in the library in their big, like, secluded monastery thing. And she finds this little statuette of a dog, and she's like, I want a friend. I'm going to make a little magical construct puppy to hang out with. And she makes it around this statuette, and instead of a puppy, suddenly it's like a full-grown, like, hunting dog who can talk, which also wasn't intended. And so that's the disreputable dog, who, despite her name, is like... She might be, like, a little sarcastic sometimes, but I remember her as being, like, faithful and loyal and kind and, like, everything... Like a model dog companion who can talk also. And I think I like her name more because of that.
Yeah, that's great.
She's perfect and precious, and also is called the disreputable dog.
Yeah. For
reasons I don't remember if they're ever explained. If they are, I don't know what the explanation is.
That's the kind of thing where just that kind of little touch onto a character provides it pays dividends in terms of like the characterization for it, right? Like by taking a character who embodies all of these things and then giving him an antithetical name, a name that doesn't fit with who they are.
Right.
The contradiction drives the reader and people to think about it and go, but why? Why is it this way? And it draws both of those things into starker relief. It draws the character's behavior into relief against the name, and the name against the character, like a chiaroscuro painting where the light versus the dark makes them both seem greater. Right. It's fantastic. It's a really good trick. I love that.
No, I think he's very... I don't know if there's another character in Garth Nix's fiction that I can say is like quite as... like pulls that trick as well, or anywhere near as well as that, but I think she's fantastic. Yeah.
That's great. You didn't... I haven't gotten the impression you've reread this series a lot. Just say a one and done, or
somewhere in college I started to reread Sabriel, and I at least started Lyriel. Yeah. And that's still, we're looking at close, like 6, 7, 8 years ago on that reread. So a lot of these details are still
that's fine.
Extremely murky for me.
I just find it, the reason I brought it up is because there's that's kind of the two paths that really influential works can do for people to me that I've seen so far, is that you either have the one that, like, this was a fire and forget thing from 15, 20 years ago, a lifetime ago, and you go, but it still lives in your brain. Or there's those ones where it's like, no, I feel compelled to revisit it every 4 years, or every year, and watch it again and again and again. And it's interesting to me the difference between something that can happen to you once, but then affects you going forward, and that it sort of lives in you without having to be refreshed, versus something that you constantly are pouring new, you're watering by reading it again, that you're nourishing that same love. It's interesting to me to see the two different versions of how these things affect people.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely more prone to the like fire and forget, like you said, of like read or watch it once.
Yeah.
I have very few things. I have very few things that I'll read or watch repeatedly broadly, no matter how
Okay.
much I like them. It's just like not something my brain calls for very
Uh-huh.
often. A lot of stuff is murky before, so getting ready to do
Yeah.
this conversation, I was like, I should read the Wikipedia summaries probably,
Oh no, don't.
because
That's actually
I literally don't remember the plot of the third book. I have no idea. I have like
Yeah.
one flashbulb memory of one scene.
See, that's I'm gonna not to deride you, but that's the rookie mistake, because what you ought to do is go read the TV tropes page.
Okay, I can see it.
It's infinitely better than trying to, because the Wikipedia format and even like the fan wiki format is like, let us get the facts, the capital F facts
Right,
onto the
right.
page. When
Yeah.
like 99% of all media is, no, we need the vibes. Like, get me the
Right.
vibes, man. And
How
that's
did this make me feel, actually?
and like, and also like, how does this what's the shorthand version of what this story beat, you know? And it's like, oh
Right.
no, this guy's the Lancer. Okay, that tells me, okay, he's the Han Solo character, you know, it's all those things that this is just, I was like, yeah, no, TV tropes page, man, it's perfect.
Yeah, no, I'll get that one next time. I'll get that one next. Yeah, no, I just, I've got like one scene from the finale of Abhorsen.
Yeah,
That's the one thing I remember.
sure.
There's a mind control plot. I could have told you that. I couldn't have told you who it surrounded. I remember. Yeah, I just have like select
Yeah,
memories, but they're strong. Like the ones that I
Yeah.
still have, like I
Sure.
feel things about still, which is
yeah. Well, I mean, like,
interesting.
that's the fact that you can't remember, certain things, but you can't, but certain parts of it stick with you, says a lot about about those parts of it. You know,
Totally.
you don't have to take away from something like the most influential work that you have in your life, you know, something like that, or something that's just you don't have to take all of it. Not all of it has to be
No.
equally. So the fact that there are parts of it that stick out and that stick with you, it just says that those parts are the ones that are important, right? And that it says something that they can stand on their own without the rest of it having to get carried along for the ride.
Definitely. And like, I feel like I want to segue into one of the scenes that I think lives with me the most is in the first book, in Sabriel. She meets this, I say meets, rescues, because he's frozen as a wooden masthead figure. She rescues this guy named Touchstone, who ends up joining her on the adventure.
Okay, sorry to that's a fucking badass name. Okay, Garth Nix can name a character. That's so good.
He really can.
That's
yeah.
so
And,
good. Okay, sorry. Continue.
and Touchstone is like, it's like a referential name within the lore of the story too, because I think Touchstone is like a character in a play in the world that like it touches a stone in some like extremely foolish and self-detrimental manner. And
Sure.
so this guy that she rescues is like, just call me Touchstone. And she's like, ooh, sorry to hear that, but okay. But they're adventuring together, and she's, this is another part of the coming of age formula, is she's going, he's kind of cute and kind of funny and nice, and also we're on an adventure, and I don't have time for this. I'm trying to save the world, so I'm not going to think about or act on these feelings in any meaningful way. And so that's all well and good until they reach an inn that they're going to stay the night at. And he goes, I'll go ahead, I'll grab us 2 rooms. He comes back, he's like, yep, I got us 2 rooms. They're upstairs next to each other. And she goes, okay, great. And they go up separately, so she doesn't see which room is actually his. And she's in the bath, just like relaxing. And she starts to hear through the wall a man and one of the like maidservants from the inn. She hears the laughing, she hears the squealing, she hears the splashing from that bathtub. And she's sitting there trying to relax and instead getting like, I'm gonna fucking kill him. I'm gonna kill him. He's a pig. How could he do this? I hate him. How could I have ever thought I liked this boy? I can't believe this is happening directly through my wall. I'm gonna give him a piece of my mind. And she walks out of her room at the agreed upon time to meet up for dinner, and he walks out of the room that is, of course, on the other side, the other adjacent room, not the one where she was hearing everything.
Right.
At which point she has to sit there and go, oh, I had those were the feelings I had about that? Really? Yeah. Oh, boy. Okay. Great. I have to deal with that now. And reading about that as a 12-year-old, you know, I'd had, I would say, rudimentary academic sex education at that point, and had like baby's first crushes at that point. And the idea that those two things were like even remotely connected was just like not in my head. And so reading this scene about like anger and jealousy and infatuation and lust and longing and all of this like whole emotional snarl, like that was new to me also, in the same way that like the body horror was new. The idea of like the emotions that surround love and crushing and all of this stuff was like, I had no idea. I didn't know what to do with it. I'd never seen it before. And I think like that scene has stuck with me, and I don't know that it's how like it must be formative in some way. I couldn't point to places in my life where it's like come through or whatever, but
that's fascinating is the wrong word. You're reminding me so much of the concept. I've heard this so many times, the idea that like there are thoughts and ideas and concepts that you will have kind of sitting in the primordial version of themselves until you hear the word for it. And then you go, oh, that thing that I didn't even know it existed, but I had already been thinking about it, or I'd already experienced it. Sure, and now it's been described, and I have a word, and that word can be a handle for you to grab onto that idea. And from there you can manipulate it and use it and work with it. And story beats can be the same way, where like you saw, I'm guessing a little bit, but you saw something in that scene that you went, oh, okay, this is the same sort of thing. This is a handle by which I can grab these concepts, these feelings.
Right.
You know, they give me a model where you can see, you know, because as a kid, the especially with child stories, you know, like Disney stories, right? Like the depiction of love is so flat, you know, most of the time. It's because that's not really what the story is about 99% of the time. It's a thing that the characters do at the end of the book, or the movie, but it's not really what the story is about. So it's really flat. So, you know, there's no purchase there necessarily for you to like feel a real relationship feeling about, you know, and then you'll see it somewhere else in a story and you go, oh, okay. And now you have a little bit of a framework that you can start to build other things off of, and you now are able to grapple with. That's fascinating. Yeah. It's a really good example of that kind of thing. It sounded like.
Yeah, no, I think so. Comparing it to like a handle for the bigger concept is, I think, right. Cause like, you know, you get when a man and a woman love each other very much, and like, okay, but what does that mean to a 12-year-old? Like, I don't know what love is. Are you kidding? Like,
and like, it's fascinating to me how little definition something like love gets, you know, like, because, you know, there's all the problems of something like love, where love is a billion different things. You know, the love you feel for your family is different than the romantic love you might feel for a partner, versus the lust or the like love you might have for a concept. You know, like you could have you can love an idea in a way that you can't love a person. All these things get smashed under this one word that aren't necessarily even related. And then, like, I heard. I'm sorry to go slightly off topic, but I was reading an online discussion the other day between aromantic people talking about whether or not aromantic people it's not even whether they can. It's should they be depicted in romantic relationships in fiction, right? This is a super narrow
Sure.
concept, right?
Sure.
And there's the two sides arguing like, well, no, but like romantic people can experience like want companionship and want like closeness and all that stuff without feeling romantic love. And I'm like, yeah, but like those are, to me at least, those are components of romantic love. Like all of the things, it's like such a weird, like the idea that people had to, they had such a narrow definition of it. Whereas that they felt like this wasn't part of it, you know? That, like romantic love is only the physical feeling you have when you feel romantically attracted to someone versus like the kind of love that you build over a lifetime of companionship and spending time together, which is like, depending on your perspective on it, is a more real version of love than like the butterfly thing. And watching people, because I was looking at this conversation, I'm like, that's the entire argument everybody's having is like, what is romantic love really?
Right. Yeah.
But that's not the conversation that they're actually like having on the page. But like, if you take one step back, you're like, oh, these people all broadly agree if they could define love in a way that they were all able to agree on. It's not even an argument about whether or not this real thing exists or not. It's how are we going to define this word? And some of them are defining it one way and some people aren't. And it's fascinating.
Right. And as long as we keep defining the same word differently, we're going to argue. But no, it's just so complicated in so many different ways and means different things to different people, which is how you get arguments like that. Right. And
and like the fact that we are able to communicate at all as humans, the fact that communication ever happens is remarkable. It's a miracle because every conversation is one person translating their thoughts into a language and then the other person then translating that language back into their thoughts. There's two levels of abstraction in every conversation. Yeah. And no two people speak the same language, really. Everybody speaks their version of the language with their own they've associated their thoughts with certain symbols, which we call words. And the other person has their own associations with those symbols that they bring to their thoughts. And they're never quite the same. But the fact that we can, between all of that crap in the middle, that two people can then make a connection and that they're able to actually communicate back and forth and the thoughts from one side are sort of able to touch the thoughts from the other side is remarkable. It's amazing that that's even possible.
We do it regularly, and that's mind-blowing.
It feels easy. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. It's amazing. And like, going back to the idea of being a storyteller and writer, the fact that you a writer can write something down, and although this is unlikely considering just the thing, but 1,000 years from now somebody could pick that up and like, okay, 1,000's a bit long because language does change. So like, you need a translator at that point. I can't read Beowulf in the original Old English, but I can read Shakespeare. Like the fact that we can that me as a modern person can read Shakespeare and go like, this is like this is still incredibly relatable. Like this is still in so many ways perfect and just like me.
I understand what these people feel, and it's been hundreds of years and it's still
I was reading Much Ado About Nothing. I mean, let me see if I can find this line. Beatrice asks Benedick, will you come with me to go talk to my uncle? And he's like, I will live in thy heart, die in thy lap, be buried in thy eyes, and moreover, I will go to thee to see thy uncle. That is 100% a modern shitpost line. Like that is a perfect, that is a Clerks line, basically. Like it's so good. It's so good. And a dude wrote that in like 1490. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I read stuff in school that was originally in ancient Greek, so like there's a translator involved, but it's just dick jokes.
Oh yeah.
Like we've been doing the same bits for as long as we've been able to do bits. It's like
as long as there've been humans, they've been carving penises into the side of hilltops and stuff. Yeah. There's a in Hagia Sophia in I believe it's in Istanbul. This is like the most beautiful mosque in the world, right? Built by Suleiman the Magnificent, 900 years ago. I'm getting my numbers wrong, but
sure.
There was some carving in the walls that nobody knew what it was for the longest time. They're like, what the fuck is this? Right? Like, we don't know. And eventually the right person came along and realized it was Elder Furthark. It's Viking ruins, right? Runes. All right?
Okay. Yeah.
Translate it. Halfdan was here.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like,
Yeah.
it's just, people have always been people, which is fascinating.
I'm going to sign my name in the wet concrete, whether it's down the block today or back in ancient Rome. Like,
yeah. Or the graffiti that this, I'm fascinated with ancient graffiti, because there's also the stuff that was written by, you know, workmen who'd been working on the pyramids and stuff. And it's stuff like, you know, fuck the boss. You know, I had sex with this person the other day. It's like, it's just the same. It's beautifully human.
Bathroom wall graffiti since the dawn of time. Like,
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like we're sort of circling in on the end of this. Is there anything else you want to cover before we head out?
Let's see. I did want to talk about, like, you know, I said I read these back in like 05, 06 roughly.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't have to take a parting shot at other children's YA fantasy authors here, but I'm going to.
Please do.
And say that you know, unlike probably the most famous one in the world right now, Garth Nix is genuinely doing his best from what I can tell. You know, I haven't read these specific books in a minute, but I remember them. I can't pick out anything objectionable. The prequel I just read has like, so the order that Lyriel's part of is called the Clare. It's all women. And they do talk about how, like, men will come visit, and that's a whole ordeal when you have a non-celibate convent of women. The man coming to visit is like a whole thing, but also it's pretty, I would say it goes past intimated that, like, some of them don't care when the man shows up. They're surrounded by women. They've got everyone they could ever need. And then, like, the most recent book that he wrote is called The Left-Handed Booksellers of London. It's like, I want to say 80s London urban fantasy. It's Thatcher era, which is, I think, 80s.
That'd be roughly 80s,
Yeah. And because
the 80s kind of extends into the first part of the 90s. Like, really.
Yeah, realistically. And, like, because it's Thatcher era, he takes it as an excuse to take some pot shots at her, and, like, the whole sort of conservative ideology there. And the two main characters in that one are, as someone who is queer and genderqueer, I look at them and I go, this is obviously a bisexual girl and a gender fluid person.
Sure, yeah.
He doesn't use that language, but he intimates towards those concepts, like, repeatedly, and that's like a cool, fun, cute, interesting thing about these characters. It's a positive thing in their lives. It's something that they're discovering about themselves. There's a sequel coming out. I don't know if he's going to go into it deeper there. I sort of hope he does, but I was very pleased to find this childhood favorite author is now writing books about queer people in fantasy settings instead of anything that J.K. Rowling has ever said or done, for instance.
I was never
plenty of other ones. Like,
I was never a J.K. Rowling head, but I loved Ender's Game, and that's I literally don't understand how you write Speaker for the Dead, and still hold the ideas that man holds. It's just another good example of how good content, it's death of the author, right? Like, it's like, if you want to enjoy a piece of work that means something to you, provided that you're not actually giving, like, monetary support to somebody who's then going to turn around and give that to fucking assholes. But like assholes can write beautiful things, and it happens. And it's surprising when that they can be so awful and also make stuff that's beautiful,
Yeah. The first time I read Speaker with the Dead, I was, like, in college, and I don't, it's one of my favorite books, I think, at this point, and I don't, it's so frustrating.
Man, like, having a complicated relationship with an author, I think, is a prerequisite to being a fully functional adult. Like,
yeah, I'm just very grateful that this is a series that I can still say, like, actually, yeah, you could read these, and I wouldn't have to be like, I'm really sorry about these couple things that you're gonna find in there, but I think you could read them. Like, no, I think they're just good.
Yeah.
I think they're just good.
That's great. Well, Ari, if people want to find more of you, where can they do that?
So I am on Twitter at Ari_Ingalls. And then if you're interested in the podcast I'm doing, that is called Go It Alone. Like I said, there's one episode. I have started writing a second one that you didn't say what it was, though. I didn't say what it was, did I? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Please don't.
So it is, I'm playing solo journaling tabletop games. And then sort of doing like narrative fiction monologue style productions of the end result of playing those games. So it's the first one's like a 15-minute journal entry. There's like, I've tossed some loose sound effects and stuff on there to make it not just incredibly monotonous.
Sure.
But yeah, it's from a listener perspective, it's short fiction. If you're interested in the fact that it's also like technically TTRPGs, it's not actual play, because that would be me muttering into a microphone for 6 hours as I like sort through story beats and stuff. But
I don't know. I think I argue with you there. I think it is actual play. Like it's
related. It's something
I think that if you start with a game, to me, that you come up with a result out of it, to me that would say, like, I think it counts. Obviously it's a matter of definitions, of course, but like I think that counts.
I'm not like recording the play, but it is actual play is happening. It's all very it's something in that space.
I don't know, if you produce an audio drama and at the same time somebody has got a copy of a source book in their hand while they do it, I think it counts.
Fair enough. You know what? Fair enough.
That sounds great though. So Go It Alone.
Go It Alone.
Probably find it on podcatchers. Awesome.
Yeah, it should be everywhere as far as I know. And then it's also on Twitter, and that's Go It Alone Pod if you want.
Awesome.
An occasional nudge when once a month ish, probably roughly. There's a new episode there. We'll see what that actually turns out.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and this was a lovely conversation. I enjoyed this so much. So thank you so much, Ari.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. It was fun to talk about these, and good to hang out for a little bit.
Well, that's it for Media That Made Us. Thanks again to Ari for the fantastic discussion. If you want to find her or her work, you should be able to check out the description of this episode to find links, along with a form where you can sign up to be a guest on Media That Made Us. Tell me about your favorite books or TV or, I don't know, trading card games. Surprise me. I'm your host, Scott Paladin. You can find me on the internet anywhere you put the words Scott and Paladin together. This has been a production of the Library of Cursed Knowledge and Podcast Network, which is, I'm going to be honest, it's basically just me. But if you want to support the podcast, you can leave us a review somewhere, iTunes, Podchaser, or you can head on over to patreon.com/cursed knowledge and, I don't know, buy me a coffee or something. That's all. See you later.